commanding selves type, which is blind. So there's two ways that we can look at compulsion. One is the one that comes from our self or our ego. So it's a compulsion that's initiated from our ego. And that compulsion is something that, Rumi doesn't like. So it says, if it's compulsion, it's a special kind, not this commanding self type, which is blind. So our ego is blind, and it's blind to the divine vision. It's blind to where we have to look for our, eventual union. It's only looking at himself, and it serves only himself. That's all there is to it. So it's like there's two ways of looking at this compulsion. So compulsion like this, few identify. So that this, in this case, is referring to the compulsion that is not serving the self, and it's serving the union with the divine love, or with God. In this case, he's like, this kind of compulsion, only a few people identify with it. God's given these men's heart and inner eye. So there is an inner eye within their heart. For instance, I think in Hinduism, they refer to it as the third eye, or in Buddhism, they also refer to it as the third eye. And this is where, Rumi is, referring to this. And then he goes, God's given these men's heart and inner eye, hidden things and the future they can see. Mentioning the past near them is blasphemy. So in this case, it's like these guys never look at anything from their past. They always look to the future, and they always look at the now, and they are always trying to be at the now. And then he goes, you found compulsion and free will in form. For them, to God's own light, it can transform. It's like there is compulsion that we find because we feel that we are completely bounded by the forms that we have inherited here on earth. And it's like you find it because you are looking at it from a form perspective. For them, or for the ones who found a special form of compulsion, for them, to God's own light, it can transform. So the way they look at it is the compulsion that they actually get to see with the divine light, as the divine light, shines upon what is, on their path or on their way. And then he goes also then, to telling us about unchanging the table where you dine, the soul transmutes it with some heavenly wine. And in this case, he's talking about the fact that, the only thing, if you want to better understand this, you have to look at it from the heart, and you have to keep on, nurturing the thirst for that divine wine that the heart wants, so that the heart can actually then do or see what it needs to see. Then, of course, we talked about the fact that between Adam and Satan, the difference is that Adam did accept responsibility for what, he did wrong, and Satan did not. And this was, these two lines. So you led astray, though Satan claimed he lied, his own deeds that veiled devil tried to hide. And then Adam came back and said, we have wronged ourselves. When Adam thus confessed, he still knew acts are God's. He spoke the best. So then there is this dialogue that, Rumi brings in, that he then repented. God said, didn't I create that crime in you? Why did you lie? Don't you know that I, in this case, I'm the one who created that ability for you to create that crime or commit that crime. I'm the one who has created that ability for you. So eventually he's like, kind of saying that everything that we do is at will of God. And then, in this case, the answer that Rumi says that Adam said is that, wasn't it all because of my decree? Why did you take responsibility? He said, through fear, I kept respect for you. God said, I've kept in mind your actions too. So he's like, I have so much respect for you. I have so much respect for your will that I have just taken this responsibility. And now I rather be at your mercy, meaning the fact that I can count on your mercy more than anything else in life. So later on, he talks about this, thing that everything that we do. So he is with you wherever you may be, and it's the the ayah that says "Hova ma'akum aynama kuntum." So he's always with you everywhere you are, or at every position, or at every place that you are. And then it says, the last two lines are the ones that I actually love the most, which says that when we show his anger when we fight with men. So when we are having fights with men, it is the anger that we portray. We reflect God's anger. So if we were to come back and figure out that why is it that we get upset about people's ignorance, that also in us, you can look at it from the perspective of that becoming upset is also something that is a reflection of God, or being God. So we show anger when we fight with men. His love, that's what we show when we forgive, at peace again. So in a way, every feeling that we feel is very much valid. It's not that it's invalid. They are very much valid, and we are, we can be okay with it. So the only thing is that what attribute of God we would like to work with. We could work with his anger, for sure. Doesn't win us anything, really. It may win us some stuff in short, in a short amount of time, or if we are being short-sighted. But for long term, this will eventually come back and get us get us in trouble. Because remember, there's also another law that whatever we do, and we've already read about this, that everything that we do in life would come back to us in a form, one way or another. So it's your choice. Whatever you do, you are, expressing that image of God, because God does possess that attribute. That's why we possess it as well. However, our action does, constitute a reaction back to us. So if we actually show anger, we will see anger back. And if we show love, we're going to see love back. So that is probably the best answer for Rasul's question from last week, that yes, you can get angry about it, but it's your choice. You can also look at it from perspective of love. And once you see it from that perspective, that is basically what brings back to you exactly that attribute. And I recall that you twice mentioned, your late mother's attitude towards a loss, and she also has made a choice in this case. So it is that type of choices, I think, that shapes our life. Because again, what we put out there, again, it does provoke a reaction, and that definitely comes to us eventually. So Um,
I'm
I
glad
think,
I came to this class, and this is going to essentially open my eyes and lead me to the promised land. And I appreciate it very much.
and we appreciate you for sure.
Yeah,
We are all headed to the same direction,
yeah,
hopefully. But this is the part that, yeah, his love. When we forgive, we put out at peace again. Who are we at the end? We are coiled and twisted like a string. What's straight apart from I? Name me one thing. So if of course, the Farsi verse of it is much, much better, which says, Ma ke iman dar jahan peach peach, chon alef u khud che darad hich hich. So in this life, which is so twisted like a coil, we are nothing. We're really nothing. So it's much better for us to actually be okay with that and stay on the positive side of it, because we want positivity to come back to us, whereas we could also go on the other side, and other things will of course show up and manifest. Believe it or not, we have seen this. As a matter of fact, it's interesting. I have I have a funny theory that I always say: the cadence of history in our lifetime has shortened. Because if you look at, let's just say, 100 years ago or 150 years ago, the actions of people and how that shaped societies and things, and how, the rulers were ruling for a while and what happened to them eventually and all that, it would take at times, it would take a few generations. We would not see them right away. But funny thing is that at the moment, at where we're at in our life right now, at least for my lifetime, it is so interesting to actually see the rise and fall of things. We have seen it. We have seen the rise and falls of dictators. We have seen the rise and falls of governments, and even people. How they have risen to a specific status or wealth, and then at some point, then again, they have fallen. So this cycle, I really believe that this cycle is getting shorter and shorter, and I think that is by purpose. For whatever reason, this is how life cadence is actually kind of has gotten a little shorter and shorter. I think it's basically because partly our consciousness is also expanding as well. So we are actually realizing things much faster as we go forward. So, anyways, having said that, let's go to the next section. So remember, there was the Roman emissary who's been who's come to visit Omar, and in this case, he basically is asking questions, very specific questions from Omar regarding life. And we have discussed the two sections of the story so far, and I think now we're at the third one. So here's what he says. It says the emissary asks Omar about the reason for the suffering of spirits in bodies of water and clay. And basically, the suffering that he's referring to is, of course, we being, the spirit of God within this body. We are trapped. We are basically, at we're very confined. We're limited. We're not as open. And in order to free ourselves, there's a lot of obstacles, mainly our ego and our mind, just basically put us in a entrapment, which, we somehow feel not necessarily empowered to do anything about it unless we start raising our level of understanding ourselves. And that's exactly what we're doing. And as we understand ourselves, we can then figure out where our actions are coming from, whether they're coming from self or whether they're coming from the divine truth. So it says, he asked Omar, what aims behind this plot to lock pure things in a filthy spot? So he's referring to the fact that the whole creation of, us as clay forms as a plot. And he goes, what is behind this plot? Pure water is hidden when it's sprayed on the ground. Pure souls in bodies likewise have been bound. Just like when you actually put water into the ground, it goes and it's hidden in the ground. It just basically gets sucked into the soil. The same thing has happened for pure souls. And why is that happening?
So is this filthy spot referring to us as human being? Is that us? Yeah.
We are filthy. We are filthy.
Yeah.
You know why we're filthy? The moment we die, within less than 12 hours, we're going to start stinking.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody wants to touch any of us anymore.
Not even the best people that love you. That's right. That's correct.
Exactly. So if this was not filthy, people would, probably look at us differently. They put us 6 feet under. I mean, next to that is garbage. So think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he said, your question seems to be quite apt. Pure meaning in a word you have tightly wrapped. So he's like, it's a good question, but your question is a little, premature in a way, because what you're doing is that, you are taking a much, much bigger meaning and you're trying to entrap that in a word, which by itself is has limited ability to transform, meanings. That's true. I mean, there's some stuff that you cannot even, we even in our daily lives, we sometimes say is that I have no word to describe this. We have ran into that situation, right? I mean, sometimes we are so amazed by something and you're like, words can't describe this, right?
Even going from the Persian version of this into English is so difficult.
True. And that's exactly what, and so Omar basically, or Rumi from Omar's perspective is referring to this. He's like, you are basically bringing this in a position of it's such a divine meaning. You want me to describe it in words and I can't do that. So you have shackled what was once free like a bird, as you have trapped the wind inside a word. So it's like by trying to asking me to, so I think what Rumi is trying to say here is that there are certain things that you can explain it up to a certain extent. And beyond that, you can't explain it. You cannot describe how it is supposed to be. You feel it, and you can't describe it. It's interesting. I always tell my, when I teach, courses on trust, first question I ask is, what is trust? And people start describing, well, if somebody does this over and over, then, we eventually trust them. I'm like, no, you don't trust them. You just know that person is reliable. But what is trust? And the funny part is that I also give everybody an example that, I'm sure you all have a friend who probably is a loser, but you trust them. You would give your house key to him. Whereas there is another friend that you have which is a very intellectual person, but you may not trust them to give him your house key. And they're like, that's correct. And I'm like, then why do you do that? Because that kind of defies all meanings. So the answer to this at the end is that trust is really a feeling. Trust at the end of the day is a feeling, and you can't describe it. You just cannot describe it.
The best visual for trust that is demonstrated in all these seminars?
When you actually fall back.
There you go.
Right.
You go. There you go.
Exactly. That's the visual description on that for sure. Yeah, you're right. But this, my whole point is we've got to internalize it and figure this out from a perspective of what we feel. Logic cannot um, process it necessarily, because, and this is one thing that I always tell people, that when couples, when trust is broken between a couple, it is extremely hard to mend it, and it would never be mended to the full extent when it's broken. I mean, people go to couples therapy to to repair something that's broken, and most of the time in those situations, one person is like, I cannot trust them still. And you can turn on your location, you can always let them track you and all that. I mean, for those individuals who commit infidelities and things like that, and still the other person is like, you know what, I can't trust them. And the reason is, no matter what you do, they don't feel that trust.
There is an exception to that.
Go ahead.
Unless one of the couple has truly reached the level of divine.
True.
And if they reach that level, they really can say, it's done, I'm good, let's move on.
Yeah, but then
it's not often that happens, but it could.
I have a follow up on that. I mean, if they have reached the full level of divine, that means that they have completely severed everything with the earthly connections.
Yeah.
Which, you're right, it actually does work, but it would eventually hurt the other person. It would. I mean, because the indifference around with the actions and words is something that people are not going to be okay with it. So anyways,
it's a no-win situation.
Yeah, let's get back to this. In this case, This is why Rumi is trying to explain to us that certain meanings, as you're trying to describe them, it will be like shackling the spirit of the meaning itself into the words, which may never do justice to it. Have you done this to make a personal gain, though you can't see this, what spirits does attain? So he's like, is this something that you're doing in order to actually do, are you trying to gain something out of this? And sometimes we do this. Sometimes, rather than us trying to experience meanings, we look for answers. And as we look for answers, every time you're looking for an answer, you're actually serving your mind. So you're gaining something. When you're actually looking into experiencing some meaning within you, you're serving your heart. That is extremely, I mean, that's the distinction between, looking at everything from a divine eye perspective or from the mind. So that's the question. Have you done this to make a personal gain, though you can't see what spirits does attain? The one from whom all benefits arise can surely see what you've seen with your eyes. And in this case, is like, whatever you feel that you're gaining or is benefiting you, you have to understand that the benefit that you had is something, or your creation had, is something that you're completely missing from it. A million benefits are here, and all compared with that one are extremely small. And in this case, he's talking about, the one benefit, which is the benefit of creation. Is like there's been a million benefits that's come out of it, but there's only everything else that has come in comparison to the one benefit that is the creation, and the benefit of trapping the soul into this clay body is extremely small. Your speech breath is part of what's a whole. Your speech's breath is part of what is whole. So don't deny pure being its true role. So as you speak, which is the part of another creation, you have to, he says, you have to understand that from that little act of speaking, which that as we speak words, and words carry meanings, and meanings hopefully help us get to, that divine understanding of our questions. So he's like, you have to look at it. If you want to understand these divine big meanings, you have to go to the very, very small level of question, answer that, and build on top of it. So if you're talking about words, you have to go back to see how words are spoken or how words are written, and how is that then building on top of meaning after meaning to actually just put this in front of us, hopefully. Though, but apart, your acts help all the same. Don't raise your hands and give the whole the blame. So it's like you are part of a whole while you don't understand that. And rather than understanding, the whole within yourself, and this is the holistic, not a whole, the holistic form that you have, and how you belong to the bigger one, to the bigger whole, is like rather than actually having that, you are trying to just, put certain blames or questions into it, which kind of handicaps the entire meaning. And he's like, don't do that. If talking has no value, speak no more. Now, this is basically a life lesson for all of us. Is like, if what you're asking, you think that there's no meaning that's going to come out of it, don't ask, or don't say it, or else give thanks. Try to be thankful. Don't be so mean and sore. Which is an interesting advice. Our mind tells us that if you have a question, you ask your question. Sometimes our questions, though, and again, it's you have to understand that as you're asking a question, what are you serving? Meaning, I don't know if you have, I'm sure all of you have debated with people who are against God.
Oh, yeah.
Those type of conversations have come up a lot, when you are, in settings. I think, I think, Rasul, you were saying that there is a person that who is against Rumi, right?
Yep.
And that is exactly where Rumi is right now telling us. It's like, if talking has no value, and you have to understand what value for yourself means. So what value am I getting out of this? What am I serving here? Am I serving the soul, or am I serving the mind, or am I serving the ego? It's like, you have to understand where this value is. And if it has no value, and in this case, the value he's looking at is if it's not serving your soul, speak no more, or else give thanks. Don't be mean and sore. It's like, rather than speaking, be thankful. Isn't that interesting? So all of you guys know what zikr is, right? All of you guys also know what tasbih is, or, the stuff that majority of Middle Eastern men, they just like to just, have it in their hands, and,
Rosary beads.
Yeah, rosary beads. I mean,
it's
but,
actually calculator for the zikr.
Yeah, exactly. But,
Bead.
I have some, I think, one of these. Yeah. And most Middle Eastern men, I'm not saying all of them, I'm not generalizing, this is what they do with it. I mean, literally in, at least I remember in Iran, and I have seen it in other countries as well, that, you know, rather than they do what they're supposed to do with this, you know, they have it in their hand, and to them, it's something that they just have to play with for whatever reason, right? Now, in this case, we're going to get to this later on in Masnavi, that Rumi tells us that you should say good words. As a matter of fact, he says you should say zekr. Zekr means that you have to praise God. So the words like, you know, Subhanallah or Allahu Akbar or, you know, Alhamdulillah or things like that, or thank to God or be thankful or things like that, they are things that he says are good. So it's like, be like that and say those things. It's interesting. He's like, rather than using what God has given you to say things that is not really serving your soul, say things that would eventually serve you indirectly, or be thankful. It's interesting. It's a very direct suggestion. It's a very direct advice that if you have nothing else to say, just be thankful and be okay with it. Just keep saying Alhamdulillah and just move forward. Our ego says, no, you have to engage. You have to, you know, hey, you have to make your point. What are you talking about? So this is us. This is him trying to tell us to train ourselves, try to figure out how these words that are not of any value for us, we should just, you know, refrain from speaking them. You know, in all religions and you know, beliefs, men of God or men who are in a position of leadership, who are in true position of leadership, you always hear them speak very few words. Mm-hmm. And that's, you know, those who are, some of them are pretending. I'm going to say this. I'm not totally saying that all of them are in the same category. You know, some of them are completely pretending. They know exactly what to do. But some of them are not. Some of them are very much aware of this fact that either I will say something which is going to be life-serving, or else I'm not going to say anything. And that's it. So if talking has no value, speak no more, or else give thanks. Don't be so mean and sore. To thanks.
There's a common expression in English that summarizes all of this. And everybody says, didn't your mother tell you if you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all?
There you go. I mean, in all languages, I'm sure there is something like that about people refraining from saying things that are not of any value. Yeah. But unfortunately, we never listen to that. So, to thanks, to place a halter around your neck, not quarreling about a tiny peck. So he's like, not necessarily everyone can be thankful. This is it's, you know, the halter that he's talking about. You know, he's like, this is what really because the Farsi this doesn't necessarily translate well, but the Farsi version says, not everyone also can be thankful. And that's very true. That's very true. You see people that they feel like, you know, they're totally entitled to what they have. They feel like they fully have deserved it. And it's interesting. As a matter of fact, some of Western, you know, philosophies actually say this, that, you know, you deserve what you get. So again, ask for it, and what you deserve will just come to you. And again, it's you know, you have to be thankful around it. It's very, and Rumi says it, that, you know, it's not something that actually will happen for everyone. If it meant to look sour only, so he's now talking about quarreling or being complaining all the time and being sour. So he's like, if it meant to look sour only, then mere vinegar would thank God more than men. So he's like, if being sourly, so every time you eat vinegar or you take a shot of vinegar, try it. I don't think you can smile afterwards. Most of the time you're like, as you down it. So he's like, that's what he's saying. He's like, if you look like you've been having vinegar. So this is people who are always pissed about things. So it's like, if that was actually something that was something that would have, connected you to God, then vinegar itself would be something that's, would be more thankful than anything else, because he's the one who is actually enabling you to become closer to God. If vinegar must penetrate the liver, and this is a bad translation, is like, you have to understand that sourness is something that would eventually penetrate, or it would eventually affect your, he's talking about your liver, but he's talking about the fact that it would penetrate your inner being. It's like, if vinegar was going to penetrate your inner being, if that's the case, then your inner being, because it's been created from the essence of God, and that essence is a sweet essence rather than a sour essence, then it would, in Farsi, I don't know the word for English, we have something which is created, they make it by mixture of vinegar and honey, or vinegar and sugar, sekanjebin, they call it. I don't know what they call it in English.
Well, so in English, it's the sweet and sour.
Right. So
it's not the same thing, but yeah.
Right. So he's basically saying that eventually your inner soul is going to turn that into being a sweet and sour thing. Then he goes, meaning in verse is nothing but insane. It's like, don't look at the meanings of words, basically, when you actually read a verse of poem. It's like a sling which no one can restrain. It's like, when it's put in a verse or it's put in a poem, it's like as if you have a slingshot, and as you let it go, nobody can actually bring that back. So he's saying two things here. One is that be careful about what you say, because as you say it, it's as if you're actually releasing a slingshot and you don't know where it's going to hit. He's also referring to himself, because his words have also been misinterpreted among scholars, which some of them have completely believed that this guy has gone mad on his philosophy about life. Okay. I mean, I know in Iran, this happened recently. There was a sitcom, not a sitcom. There was a TV series that they wanted to make about Rumi, and they canceled it. And the reason they canceled it was because majority of the mullahs that we have are ignorant about what this guy says. They don't like it, as a matter of fact, because it puts them in an awkward position. So anyways, any questions? All right. So we're going to go to the next section, which is on the meaning of let whoever wants to sit with God sits with Sufis. Now, this Sufi that Rumi is talking about, I want you guys to remember this. Not everyone is a Sufi, according to Rumi. He is very particular about who Sufi is. And in this case, people like him are the ones who can carry this title. Unfortunately, Sufis and Sufism is something which has been misinterpreted in our current culture, and there is a specific symbolism that's associated with it. For instance, if you go to Turkey, to Konya, where Rumi has been buried, there is a specific way of dressing up, which that resembles Sufism, with a very, tall hat and the long skirts and all that. And there is a specific Sufi dance and all that stuff. And some of these things are resembling what Rumi was, or what Rumi used to wear at his time. But the fact of the matter is that Rumi really looks at the inner souls and the meaning behind this whole body, and the way, they portray themselves as the meaning of what a Sufi is. And that's what he's now trying to tell us here. So,
Mohsen, can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
Before you get into this section.
Sure.
I lost connection and I was gone for some time, so I'm sorry I just came back in. But the last section that we just finished, I have to confess that I tried to read the Persian version and the English version of these things that you go through ahead of time, so make sure that I'm not totally lost. This section in Farsi was the hardest ever.
It is.
To comprehend, the one that we just left.
You're right.
I usually read it and I'm okay, and more or less I can follow, until I got to the last sentence or the last poem where he says, I give up. I try to put things in word and I can't even do it. And it's like a slingshot that you throw it, sometimes it hits, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. And we talked about that. So I guess that's the part that you missed. That's why he brings in, I said he's telling us two things. One is that, just, when we say things in words and we say them, the intention may not be carried on with the word itself, plus the fact that he's also talking about himself, that his words could be misinterpreted.
Right.
And that is something that, we have seen it happen. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. Let's go through this other one. I guess hopefully it kind of puts a nail in the coffin as far as what, this whole encounter between the emissary and Omar. So it says, on the meaning of let whoever wants to sit with God, sit with the Sufis. This made the messenger lose self-control. So once he heard all of this from Omar, I'm sorry.
Oh, just in terms of that, in that expression, in that saying, is Sufis the translation of another word, or is that the word that's used in Farsi?
It's used in Farsi. He's basically using that expression because that word has carried over to English, I think.
Okay.
The word Sufi you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's carried over, basically. So it somehow symbolizes, what do you call it? Your, spirituality and things like that. I mean, it's kind of synonym with all of those. Okay. But it carries that image of what I described, everyone kind of, I even use that image in some of the logos that I have used, the dancing guy. So this whole dance, just to, give you guys a context around it, we're going to get to it later on. It's actually in book 5 that he talks about the what they call the dance of the sky, or Sama. But the way the dance is that, there is a hand that actually is extended towards the sky, and there is a hand that's extended towards the earth. And then there is a rotation, and with this form. And you have to first understand the meaning of rotation. Yes, you have to first understand the meaning of rotation. And whether you know it or not, every religion also has rotation in it. They just do. Because rotation as a whole puts us in a focused form. So it's part of your focus. So for instance, when we do the Hajj, you rotate around the Kaaba 7 times. The rotation is basically the focus of every time you want to actually extract what is not pure out of yourself or out of anything, what you do, those of you, I don't think if anybody has studied medical sciences or anything here, I think all of us are engineers, but I've had lab work done. So they normally would put your blood, for instance, in a centrifuge, and it can separate, the particles of blood, and you can see it, or any sort of a chemical, you can always do that with. So the rotation does 2 things. One is the focus, and the other one is the separation of, unwanted particles. And the reason that Rumi had this pose is the fact that as he rotated, he wanted to ensure that there is a connection between what is coming from above and what is basically given to us from the earth. And he needed to be that connection. And he felt that that was the connection that got him to that level. And it's, the story is that he would be dancing for like 24 hours, which I just gonna have to say, take it at face value. I don't know if that's even humanly possible, but apparently he did. And to him, it was something that it would bring that level of getting out of your mind and that level of, connection between the heaven and the earth. And that's how he gained it. I mean, that's how that dance gave it to him. Okay. So the power of God left him completely dazed. He came and to a higher state. He came and to a higher state was raised. So he's talking about, again, the emissary of Rome. And he's like, he basically was able to actually achieve a higher state. On reaching it, a flood became the sea. In soil, a seed may grow from a tree. So he's like, as he actually reached that level of consciousness, or as he reached that level of realization of God, then, that level of realization of God gave him, made him connected to the sea. So now that flood basically found its way to the unlimited wisdom, or the sea of knowledge. When bread is in our gut, it comes alive and soaks up knowledge, which helps all things thrive. So he wants us to fully grasp this and understand that in life, we also go through transformation, and things that, may feel are not alive to us become alive as they go through these transformations, like the bread. When wax and timber both are set alight, their essence, which was dark, becomes so bright. If you apply some kohl around your eye, you'll learn to see as well as any spy. Kohl is I think to this day, there are certain, it's basically mascara, but in the old form. It was a specific stone that women would use in order to, kind of put makeup on their eyes. And that stone, or kohl, was also something that would enhance their vision. That's what it was. So he's saying that it's as if you do that to your eyes, so that your eyes will gain that divine vision. Happy the man who from himself is free, and joins with being in true unity. Now he's talking about men who were able to free themselves from the boundaries of the clay that they were trapped in it, and they were able to join, their essence, and again, come to their unity. Alas, the one who mixes with the dead, he'll die himself because he's been misled. There are others who, rather than join with the divine source, they would go with things that are already dead or will be dead pretty soon. Or in this case, dead means things that are not necessarily they are not how should they are meant to be gone. And that's what he's referring to. So anything that we possess in this life is basically anything that would be destined for being dead or being gone. So many prophets the Quran extols. Read it, become familiar with their souls. So he's like, you have to understand, and he refers specifically to the Quran here. And he says that there have been many prophets that were mentioned in there. And the reason they were mentioned is not because of who they were in the earthly form, is because of how they were elevated by their souls, and their souls were connected. For it describes each one's biography as fish in the sea of divinity. Every prophet has been described as someone who God had taken a specific attention towards. So that's why he believes that they were all in the sea of divinity, and that's how they were able to, God speaks of them with such passion and love. If you recite but don't accept the book, you have turned them down, although you have had a look. Of course, it's like if you recite what the Quran says and you don't accept Quran. Now, in this case, remember, he is one person once asked me in a different class that, how do we know Rumi is right? And I said, actually, we don't. And this is why we know he's right. We have to believe that the Quran and other holistic books like the Torah and Bible are coming from God. And there are words of God that were revealed to the prophet. We have to believe that, because he bases a lot of what he says on the verses of the Quran and also of the sayings of the Bible and Torah. So if we don't believe that, then we have nothing to talk about. So those people who actually take specific stance when it comes down to Masnavi, if you ask them, and this would be a very simple question, it would be like, hey, do you believe in the Quran? And if they say no, then you're like, hey, we got nothing else to talk about. Because I can't go on trying to tell you and convince you what this guy is saying is right. I can't do that. So if you accept the stories on each page, you'll feel your soul's bird trapped in a cage. So it's like, as you read these stories from the Quran, you start realizing how your spirit has been trapped in a cage, because everything in the Quran is all about how to free you from the limitation of this body. This is how Rumi looks at the verses of the Quran, which then I have to say, it gives a different meaning and perspective to when we pray, to when we read the ayahs of different verses, different surahs of the Quran, because he's looking at it from a perspective of a tool to free his soul. He very specifically takes aim at, for instance, the Surah Hamd, which we recite that when we, for those of us who pray, we recite that at least 5 times a day, or twice every, so sorry. We recite that about 7 times a day. I'm sorry. What is it? 1, 2,
17 times.
4, 5, 17 times. Yeah. Anyways, that could be a trick question. So there is a very specific ayah in there that says, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. So I only worship you and I only want help from you. Later on in other chapters, you guys will read how he views this. He gives an example of a mother. When a mother has a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old baby, and if she disciplines the baby, although the baby knows that she's been disciplined, what happens is that after she or he has been disciplined, she runs back to her mother. She doesn't run away. Those of you who have children have experienced this, I'm sure. They just come right back to you, although you're the one who's been disciplining them. And he uses this ayah, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in, as that. He's like, no matter what you do to me, I still worship you and I still want you to help me overcome things. So, having said that, when we read this line, which it says that the verses of the Quran are things that, it helps us escape, then I guess that's like, that gives a different vision into how we look at the Quran and we look at all these verses. So spirits which have escaped from their constraints are fit to guide like prophets and like saints. Their voices speak of faith when they should say, this is your one escape route, come this way. Through faith or through religion, in a sense, we have escaped the narrow cell. There is no other way out of this hell than to be seen as suffering what's worse in order to flee reputation's curse. So it's like most of the time this is not the first time in history that, for instance, being a religious person is not of fashion. You know that these days, if most people like to brand themselves as spiritual, especially Muslims. Why? Because it's not a fashionable thing to be a Muslim. There is such a branding around that. And Rumi is telling us that. He's like, for your reputation, so for the curse of your reputation, you actually make your soul suffer. So he's like, then to be seen as suffering what's worse in order to flee reputation's curse. For reputation is such a heavy chain, much worse than iron chains in this domain. It's like people worry about their reputation so much, and they carry this heavy chain as, they rather look at things in a different way. or at least put themselves in a position that their reputation is unharmed. It's very interesting. In all cultures and all, all countries, reputation is a thing that people try to hold on to it. And he's saying that sometimes your reputation is something that is preventing you from, unbounding yourself from this cell, the jail cell. All right. Any questions about this section?
I think I need more explanation about this last sentence that you just said, that your reputation is putting you in jail.
It does. You're not free because of it, he says. I'm going to speak about me. So I'm going to basically, especially during Donald Trump's presidency, which hasn't ended yet. There have been times that I probably would not have engaged in a specific conversation because I didn't want to instigate any sort of a bad feeling in the person that I was having a dialogue with. And that was because I was bounded by my work and my contract. So that's the chain that my reputation had put on me, whereas I should have freely be able to come back and say, no, I'm a Muslim, and I don't like it that Muslim people are being branded as, people who are going to do shameful things here, or they're terrorists, or there is a ban on Muslims, or things like that. I refrained from carrying on that conversation because of the fear of what that would do to my reputation. So that is my explanation for it. So he's very, at least that last line, for reputation, such a heavy chain. It was a heavy chain. I didn't like it, but I did it. So.
Well, my perspective about this reputation is I do commercial real estate investment sales for a living. And I always tell my clients that as a real estate broker, I only have two assets. It's my time and my reputation. Neither one I can jeopardize. So
that reputation is, again, it's something that you, I don't want to probably bring in hard examples here. That is your people rely on your words, or you're trying to be true to what you at least advise or
right.
Perhaps suggest to your clients. I don't think this is the reputation that he's.
It's not the same.
No, it is the reputation that he's talking about is when it comes down to do what is right in your heart versus what is right for the sake of that specific situation where it would make you gain something or lose something monetarily, not from your soul, but something that would, bring a specific possession for you. And are you then, trading off God's advice versus what you think is going to give you a specific, added benefit?
But that's exactly what I'm talking about. The reputation is when they ask me to do unethical things that I don't do.
And you don't. So there you go. So you're not compromising your values for a specific reputation. You could you could have a reputation, by the way, that, there's an agent that he can get anything done.
Right.
He'll make miracles happen. Most of the time, the ones who do miracles happen. They're the ones who, might forge a document. They might do this and that. And so that is a reputation.
Right.
If you come back and you're like, no, I do things by the book, and I don't, I try to make sure that everybody actually get exactly what they deserve by the book and all that. That is you sticking to your principles, which then gives you a different reputation. But again, if your principles are this is actually a better explanation. If your principles are the driving factor on your daily life, which your principles are all coming from your faith and your belief and your heart, then you're good. But if your ego is the one that's driving all your stuff, then you got a problem.
Okay, I understand.
I don't want to talk politics, but we know in politics, it is a fundamental thing to actually drive what. It's interesting sometimes when they show a specific clip of a politician who, like 4 years ago, have said something, and 4 years later he does completely the opposite.
Next day, what are you talking about 4 years later?
No, well, I'm talking about the latest Supreme Court justice who actually went, who replaced Justice Ginsburg.
Yeah.
I remember specifically when Justice Scalia died, and how basically the Senate came back and said, when it's a lame duck president, we don't put a justice in the Supreme Court. It's That's never been. And I remember Orrin Hatch. Orrin Hatch is a Mormon. He is a man of God. I know it because I grew up in Salt Lake City. I know exactly what type of man he is in the Mormon church. He actually made a very, very specific statement about the fact that don't push it because we're not going to do it. But 2 months or a month to the election, they confirmed the justice. The same people who said this 4 years back.
Oh, yeah.
So this is where your principles and your reputation are, in conflict.
Yeah.
All right. So we're about to start a very, very interesting story. This is a story that I know in English that this has also been, translated. It's about Merchant and the Parrot. I do believe in other cultures, this also has been something that has been translated. It's an ancient story. Basically, people look at it as, not very many people look at this story as a spiritual story. Rumi takes this into a different level. And just like how he took the lion and the rabbit into a different level, you guys will see this. This one is going to be like a very, very, so I urge you guys to specifically, we probably are going to just get to read the very first section. And this very first section has got some very, very nice lines, which I really want you guys to remember. Okay. So the story is about a merchant who's about to go to India and asks everybody, just like how, these days, if you go in on a trip, what do you want? A souvenir from that place. Every time Rumi is talking about India, so when it's talking about India, he's talking about a place where the soul travels. And when he is referring to China, he's referring to where things of earthly possessions, are gained. Again, it has nothing to do with China virus or anything like that. It's just that, when he's using you guys will hear this, that, he talks about India versus China. And again, it's just that there's a symbolism associated with it. It's not the country.
He almost feels homesick when he talks about India.
He does, yes.
Yeah.
Again, it's because he believes it's a place that, the soul travels to.
Yeah.
So a merchant kept his parrot so confined inside a cage, you'd think he was unkind. But when he planned to make a trip for trade to India, where the finest goods were made, to all his servants he went down to say, "What shall I buy for you while I'm away?" So he went and asked everybody, "What do you want?" They listed things on which their hearts were set, and he swore that he never would forget. He asked the parrot, "What would you prefer that I should bring for you from India?" The bird said, "When you see the parrots there, please tell them all about my sad affair." So basically, the parrot is like, so parrot is the symbolism of a bird in a cage. And the previous story of the emissary and Omar, remember, it was about the bird and a cage. So these are kind of connected now. So he says, so the bird said, "When you see the parrots there, please tell them all about my sad affair. Tell them a parrot pines continually to see you, but she is caged by fate's decree." So the message is that I'm of your kind. I would like to be with you, but I can't get to you. She sends her greetings and she asks for justice. She wants to learn the faith you parrots practice. So basically, that's the thing. So tell them hi from me and ask them, how is it that they can be free and I'm not? She says, "Should I stay longing here for you in exile and then give my life up to?" So he basically is referring to being in a cage as being in exile. And he's like, should I actually be in exile? Is that what you guys think that my destiny is supposed to be? Should I stay in this cage? Can this be right? While in the woods and meadows you take flight. So again, it's the whole notion of our spirit being free and being able to experience the limitless or the abundance of this universe versus being caged in our body and being completely confined to what the needs of this body is. Where now is our famed solidarity? So he's now basically saying that we are all part of the same whole. So how come we're not worried about each other? So where's your solidarity towards me while I'm in gold? While I am in gold, the rest of you are free. So when I am now completely caged, and the rest of you are just flying freely around. My noble friends, remember this poor bird, and drink to me tomorrow. Spread the word. So he's like, basically part of his message is that he tells them that don't forget me. And as you are enjoying the divine the divine heaven, drink for me, or remember me as you're drinking. And in this case, he's referring to tomorrow is not the right word. The specific word is drinking in the morning. So this is basically drinking something like a mimosa or Bloody Mary. And the reason I say that is because the word itself is referring to the type of drink that people would drink when they wake up. Not so sabuhi is the type of drink that you drink when you wake up in the morning. So he's like, as you get up and you start your drinking, just drink one for me as well. If friends remember one, then one is blessed. Majnun's love for his lady, though, was best. So he's like, it's so good that if, friends would remember one another, just like how, Layli and Majnun, which is a tale of a love story from Nizami, who is another Farsi poet. It's kind of like, Romeo and Juliet type of thing. It's a love story. So he's referring to that. In fine surroundings, you recline and think, while I just have my blood left now to drink. Thinking is not necessarily the right word here. So he's telling, the message says that you're my friends and you are basically surrounding, you are around the most beautiful being, and you're doing your drinking while I'm drinking my own blood, because I am not happy where I am. So down a glass of wine for my sake, friends, if you don't want to try to make amends. Now, again, Rumi is a very well traveled person, and he knows these type of expressions. Downing a glass back in the days was when men would get together. As a matter of fact, for those of you who have seen Game of Thrones, which is an absolute, I thought it was nice, but I think it was terrible series. I watched it all though in the pandemic. In there, they down the wine in the memory of the fallen soldiers. So downing the wine is when you have a cup of wine and you actually put it, spill it on the ground because there was the blood that was spilled, or some of my friends, have been, for instance, passed away, or they've been killed in the battle. I would down a glass of wine for them. So in this case, Rumi is referring to that expression. So he says, so down a glass of wine for my sake, friends, if you don't want to try to make amends. So it's like, if you can't help anything, if you can't help me with anything, then just down a glass for me. Remembering.
Mohsen, in some cultures, they don't do the whole glass. They drink it, and then what's left at the end, they threw that as a reminder of their friends.
Right. You're absolutely right. Yeah. Or they leave the glass upside down or something. Yeah. So remembering one who's fallen in the dust, you'll pour the dregs upon the ground, I trust. So it's like, then hopefully this is what you guys will do, that as you are drinking, you will pour one on the ground for me. What happened to the oath that we all swore? Don't promises you make count out anymore. What is the oath that he's referring to in here? And I really believe you guys know the answer to it. That's a question.
Could that be a lust too?
Say again.
The oath of, it's like a lust too. Have I not created you?
Exactly.
Yes.
There you go. That's the one. Very good. Thank you, Masnavi. Yeah. So that's it. That's basically the oath. We've covered that ayah. It's in the Quran, which says, Alastu bi-rabbikum, am I not your God? And everyone said, yes, you are. So he's referring to that. He says, what happened to the oath that we all swore? Don't promises you make count anymore. Now, what he's again referring to the fact is that I need to be with you, and you guys have to help me to get out of this cage. Basically, now, remember in the previous story, he was referring to the prophets, and he was referring to how the prophets were mentioned in the Quran, and how their mention, what was mentioned in the Quran from the prophets, is something that was good for us to follow in order to free ourselves from this cage. He's referring to that now in here, that what happened to that oath. So he's now trying to connect, or he's telling us to connect to that oath, because we all took that together. And basically, the people who can help us get out of this cage are the prophets, or people like Rumi, in a sense. Have I deserved my fate for some offense? Have I done something wrong? If you hurt sinners, what's the difference? So he's basically now coming back and saying that if I did anything bad, why is it that you would try to, basically punish me for it? Okay. So he's like, and it's a bad translation here. So from this point on, by the way, the conversation is not about the parrot and the message anymore. It's about Rumi himself talking to God. So he's saying that the fact that if I'm separated from you is because I have been a bad worshiper, or if I have been a bad human. That's why I'm separated from you. But if you do bad things again to me, and the bad things he's referring to is like, if you keep me distant from yourself, then what's the difference between me and you? So think about it from a conversation of a lover to his beloved, that, I'm tired of being away from you. And if you keep, if I've done something wrong, you have to forgive me and bring me back closer to yourself. And if you keep keeping the distance between us, then what's the difference between me and you? You were supposed to be the bigger one. You were supposed to be the one who would forgive. The harm you cause in war and retribution delights me more than musical audition. So he's like, if you do anything bad to me, if I have to pay retribution for whatever bad I've done, whatever thing you actually do to me, that's still more accepting for me than if I were to hear a nice musical gesture. I mean, he's basically telling God, it's a prayer, that whatever you do to me, it's sweeter for me than whatever happens to me here as a sweet gesture of this life. It's complete acceptance. The harm you cause in war and retribution delights me more than musical audition. Good fortune can't match torture that's from you. So if I were to be given good fortune in this life, it can't match what I would get from your torture. Meaning the fact that if you torture me, I would love that more than the good fortune that I would get in this life.
That's masochistic.
I'm sorry?
That's masochistic.
If you want to look at it that way, yes, it is. But think about it. But hold on. Before you say that, you have to wait until this passage is over, because this is one of the most delightful passages that is written.
Yeah.
Your wrath is dearer than my own life too. So he's like, I am so devoted and I'm so emptied out of my own ego and my own self that your wrath is dearer to me than my own life. Is this your fire? How great must be your light? If this right now, the fact that me and you are separated is your fire, then oh my God, how would your light be? The funerals now, the party starts tonight. So he's like, if this is supposed to be my funeral, if this is supposed to be the sad event in my life, what would it be if you're going to give me a happy event? And he's talking about our lives. Our lives right now, in Rumi's eyes, is a sad event, and we don't know it. We get happy because we eat a good food. We get happy because all of a sudden we now can get out of our house and have dining outside. We become happy. So Rumi is like, if this is supposed to be happy? What would it be if I actually get one from you? Because to me, this is all hell. To me, this is all being in a cage. Think about how he's actually contrasting these events and how he's looking at them, what vision he's actually having. Is this your fire? How great must be your lights? The funeral's now, the party starts tonight. Because of sweetness in your wrathfulness, none know the full depth of your tenderness. It's like when you're even wrathful towards us, or when you're actually punishing us for something, there is a sweetness in that too. What would it be if you just were to give us sweetness, nothing else? How would that look like? Then here he stops himself. He's like, I moan, but fear that he might answer me. It's like right now I feel like I'm complaining. I shouldn't be, because he actually would answer me. I know he answers me. And by kindly softening his tyranny, he's like, I don't want him to soften his tyranny, because I'm enjoying that. Are you guys getting this part?
Mm-hmm.
He sees himself as complaining, and he stops himself. It's like, I moan, but fear that he might answer me. It's like, I'm telling him that, I'm not happy about this. And it's like, oh, no. I shouldn't do it, because he's going to make it better, because he would always do that for me. It's like, I should stop. I'm smitten by his wrath and kindness too. My love for opposites amazes you. So basically what he's saying here is that I'm moaning, and at the end, though, by smitten, he means that he's in love. He's totally in love. He's like, I'm so in love by his wrath and kindness. He's like, I see both, and I'm in love with both of them. He's like, my love for opposites should amaze you. He's like, how would people are going to tell me I'm crazy? How could you be in love both for his wrath and kindness? Whereas like, this is how I see it. I need you guys to really get this part.
Mm-hmm.
If I escape these thorns now for a rose, and nightingale's lament, I will compose. It's like, if I were to just, if this pain eases a little bit, I will just all of a sudden become like this nightingale that I would just basically, I would be singing all over the place. Strange nightingale whose mouth is open wide to fit both thorns and roses now inside. He's like, what's strange is that there is a creature like a nightingale that can actually enjoy both the thorn and the flower together. That's no bird, but a fiery dragon there. Love's made all seem to him so sweet and fair. So it's like, this is not a nightingale. It's a fiery dragon, which, because the love for his beloved is so much, everything that seems to be uneasy for him is a kind gesture. He sees it all as kindness, nothing else. He loves the whole, which is here and above. So this creature, like himself, like Rumi, he loves the whole, which is here and above. He loves himself thus and seeks his own love. He's like, he loves the whole because we are all part of a whole. But he's also a whole himself. So therefore, he loves himself. He needs to first love himself to actually, from loving himself, he can get to loving God. Now, how many times from these psychologists you guys have heard that you have to have self-love? And people think that psychologists got this from Freud or whatever the hell, all these psychologists were. No, it all came from this guy. You have to first have self-love. Why? Because you are God. The God is within you. So you love you because there is a God within you. So that way, then from loving yourself, you get to love God. Does that make sense?
That was the whole essence of Shams's involvement, to get him to know himself.
Exactly.
That was the whole reason for Shams being involved in this whole scenario.
Aziza, are you following?
I struggle with this, and I've been coming into this and trying to accept kind of like circumstance and everything. Like, this is hard. This is very hard.
But does the meaning make sense? Loving yourself and finding God within yourself, and how that's going to actually then connect you to the whole. I mean, finding God within us is part of knowing us. And this is literally what he's referring to in here. The fact that within us, there is this opposites. We are made out of opposites. That's why he's referring to this, that I'm amazed that I'm in love with this opposite, which gives me joy and also gives me sadness. But I love it both, because through this opposite, I understand me, which once I understand me, I understand the essence that's in me, and what was nafachto min ruhi, or what was given from the breath of God in me. So once I know that, then I actually can connect to God. This is why understanding God comes from us and from within us.
I guess we can easily expand it and understand it better. Imagine when we love, let's say, an artist because of a great work of art that he or she creates. So if we are the Ahsan al-Khaliqin, and you look at yourself and you are in love with that creation, obviously you love the creator deeper because you are one of the items that he creates.
The only thing is that, remember, the artist is outside of you. In this case, the artist is within you.
Mm-hmm.
And he paints everything with its opposite. It gives you pain and it gives you pleasure. Ennama al usre yusra. We have read this in the Quran, right?
Yes.
Please, everybody should nod. You guys have read this, right?
Yeah.
Ennama al usre yusra. What does that mean? That means that with every hardship, there is an easier path as well. That will
and
come.
He'll repeat again immediately. Ennama al yusra yusra. So
exactly.
If you don't get it the first one, get the second one.
So this is the opposites that is in our lives. It's the opposite that's within us. It's the opposites that we experience on a daily basis. And through the opposites, we have to find it. We have to find God. We just have to. I mean, think about literally this ayah, which is, I mean, that whole surah is so beautiful. Hold on. So it's where is it? This is, and I know you guys all are men and women of faith. So please go back and read this. It says, Alam nashrah laka sadrak. So have we not expanded thy by your heart? In this case, it's not your breast, it's your heart. And removed from thy any burden. This is a direct, of course, the ayah towards the prophet, but it's us. It's literally us. Didn't we do this for you? God has done this to us. Allazi anqaza zahrak. And the which did gal back. It brought you down. There have been hardships that we've had that has totally put us down. And we raised you again. With every difficulty, there is relief. As Mohsen said, it repeats it twice. I mean, if we believe Quran and if we believe that this is a word of God, then we should believe this. So, فَإِذَا فَرَغْتَ فَانْصَبْ وَإِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ فَارْغَب. In this case, again, this is where Rumi is giving us a practical translation and understanding of this surah. Anyways, I'm going to stop here.
Very good.
I leave you guys with this. I really totally urge you to please go back and read, at least go back and read this surah and think through the words, specifically this very last part that we discussed. How the opposites in us, how the opposites sometimes bring us down, and the same opposites actually get us out of our hardships. Yeah. Anyways, have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I shall see you guys next week.